All right. Good morning. Good morning. I would like to call this meeting of the House Labor Industry Committee to order. Jonathan, please take the roll.
Dawkins,
Here.
Brennan, Donahue, Jarrell, Green,
Here by designation.
Haddock,
Here by designation.
Kincaid, Krajewski, Mirsky, Miller,
Here by designation.
O'Mara, Scott, Siegel, Young, Grove,
Here.
Anderson, Barger, Bernstein,
Designation.
Cooper, Diorsi, Ecker, Fink, Gleim,
Designation.
Jones,
Designation.
Reichard,
Designation.
Rossi.
Designation.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First on our agenda, today's agenda, I would like to call up House Bill 118, printer's number 100, sponsored by Representative Young, second by Representative Kincaid. Ryan, can you please explain the bill?
House Bill 118, printer's number 100, amends the Child Labor Act to double the amount of the criminal fines for violations of the act.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize the prime sponsor of HB 118, Representative Young, to offer brief remarks on her legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. State legislatures across the country have recently considered and enacted bills to roll back longstanding child labor laws. This includes allowing children as young as 14 to serve alcohol, eliminating work permits for minors, and permitting children to work longer hours. The loss of protections for our youngest workers comes at a time when the U.S. Department of Labor has reported a 83% increase in the numbers of our minors employed in violations of child labor laws. And between 2022 and 2023, cases in Pennsylvania increased by 43%. My legislation, House Bill 118, will double the criminal fines for violations of Pennsylvania's Child Labor Act. These amounts have remained the same since at least 2012 and are lower than most of our neighboring states. For example, Delaware and Maryland both allow for penalties up to $10,000, even for first-time violations. Unfortunately, there are too many recent examples of child labor law violations from across the Commonwealth. At a time when long-standing worker protections are under attack across the country, we must ensure the penalties for exploiting Pennsylvania's children are high enough to deter criminal behavior. Because when the fines are too low, they are seen as just another cost of doing business. Identical legislation that I introduced last session was reported from this committee unanimously and passed the House 180 to 23. It also passed the Senate Labor and Industry Committee unanimously, but failed to receive further consideration. I respectfully ask for all members for an affirmative vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Representative Grove, who will be offered Amendment A00036. Andrew, please explain the amendment.
Thank you. Amendment 00036 by Representative Grove adds a second-degree misdemeanor offense and a fine of up to $5,000 for a willful violation when the employer knew or reasonably should have known the child was without proper parental care, control, education, and supervision. Amends administrative fines to impose a $5,000 penalty for a willful violation, a violation which causes or creates a significant risk of bodily harm and falsification of records. Provides for a warning letter for a first negligent violation and for department follow-up in 30 days, and provides a penalty for a subsequent negligent violation or a negligent violation that occurs with a willful violation be subject to a penalty of $100 up to $500 for a group of the same type of negligent violations.
Thank you. Representative Cooper makes a motion to adopt Amendment A0036. Second by Representative Ecker. Mr. Chairman, would you like to make any remarks to your amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One perspective I have coming into this committee is how do we work on legislation together in a bipartisan way to get it signed into law? This is I think, a good compromise to do two things. Number one, I have zero tolerance for human trafficking, modern-day slavery in the United States of America. We have a big issue here in Pennsylvania. We are a transit hub. We know it's occurring. I have it in York County because of 83, the Turnpike. Bucks County actually is one of the largest human trafficking spots in the United States. This bill puts harsher penalties on individuals who want to willingly traffic children for labor purposes. On the other side of it, we have a lot of businesses that get wrapped up with heavy penalties for basically paperwork errors. So this tries to set a policy correct where if you have a paperwork error on your first time, the department will work with you on correcting those payments moving forward and try to mitigate large fines for first-time offenders on paperwork errors to try to alleviate those burdens on businesses moving forward. My understanding is my colleagues are going to be a no on it, but hopefully we can have further discussions on the floor to advance those two concepts, to include them on this. And I think doing that, we'll get it through our friends in the Senate. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Representative Kincaid.
I just have a quick question for clarity on this proposed amendment, the second-degree misdemeanor offense. Who would be charged with that?
Yeah, the employer who violates the law.
But is it the owner? Is it the manager? Is it how is that decided?
Yeah, whoever they would charge on the summary offense on the underlying bill.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I just had, I guess, more of a comment than a question. One of the concerns that I had is the may provision in this particular amendment that essentially takes the ability of the department to make that ultimate decision if a violation should be set forward versus a warning. And the reason I say this, given the current environment that we are experiencing, where it feels like a very heavy hand towards the employee who may be in violation versus the employer. And this essentially would give the employer a way out, almost a slap on the wrist, versus the actual violation requirement that the department could be able to make if they were given a chance. I do not want to essentially tie their hands in making that decision, which is why I'm urging members to oppose, because I do think it weakens the department's ability to enforce the act. And we want to make sure that we're holding employers accountable for child labor violations. And with that, I'm going to have Jonathan take the roll.
Dawkins?
No.
Brennan? Donahue? Jarrell? Green?
No by designation.
Haddock?
No by designation.
Kincaid? Krajewski? Mirsky? Miller?
No by designation.
O'Mara? Scott? Siegel? Young? Grove?
Yes.
Anderson? Barger? Bernstein?
Designation, yes.
Cooper? Diorsi? Ecker? Fink? Gleim?
Designation, yes.
Jones?
Designation, yes.
Reichard?
Designation, yes.
Rossi?
Designation, yes.
The amendment fails.
Thank you. And on to the bill. I'm going to turn back to our chairman for any comments on the bill.
At this time, I think we can list Republicans.
Okay.
Or Representative Cooper will be a yes on this. Yes. All the other Republicans can be a negative.
Okay.
But we look forward to further discussions. I think the gentlelady's heart's in the right place, and obviously we want to ensure public safety at all times. But I think we could work on the amendment I offered, hopefully for the floor act. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
Thanks to the gentlelady as well.
Thank you.
Go Eagles.
Yeah. Any other questions before we? All right, so we can move to the vote here. So, Jonathan, we're going to just record all Democrats in the affirmative along with Representative Cooper and everyone else in the negative.
The bill passes.
Thank you. All right, House Bill 118 is reported as committed from the House and Labor Industry Committee. We're going to move on to our next bill. I would now like to call up House Bill 183, printer's number 130, sponsored by myself and Representative Brennan. Representative Brennan makes a motion to consider this bill, And I have a second by Representative Green. Ryan, please explain the bill.
House Bill 183, Printers Number 130, amends the Workers' Compensation Act to expand eligibility for permanent disfigurement benefits to injuries that occur anywhere on the body,
Okay.
and increases the maximum number of weeks for receiving the benefits from 275 weeks to 400 weeks, while also clarifying that this benefit is separate from partial or total disability benefits.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize the co-sponsor, Representative Brennan, for brief remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. I practiced workers' comp law for something like 15 years. I've seen every variety of way that someone could have a horrific injury in the workplace. And there are so many stories where a person is injured and doesn't have any protection from the workers' comp statute, can't come after their employer because that's the trade-off in the workers' comp code that however an injury occurs, the claimant will be protected. But you never can file a suit against your employer, even if it was intentional, even if there was some horrible mistake that they made, and even if they were cutting corners. So, I've seen a waitress with hot oil spilling it all down her chest. I've seen, the Boilermaker who's in an explosion, firefighters. And these are the kind of people who aren't covered by that, everyday workers that we see. This is a 110-year-old statute. This brings a little closer to the 21st century. The expected costs of this, I think, are we've heard that this is going to cause new litigation. No one's going to go and have a neck surgery to get payment for 20 weeks of a scar on their neck. And that's a lot of times when this is coming up. A lot of times you see it during cervical disectomies where there's a scar that's really prominent on the front of your neck. That's where this is applied most frequently. In terms of the cases that it comes up in scarring, it's 1 in 20, maybe 1 in 40, 50 maybe, who knows? But it's the exception. You don't see it very frequently. The concern some folks I've heard is that this would cause more people to go out this. There are breaks in the statute. It has to be permanent. Someone who has a cut and it's just appearing right away, you can't go in and say I have scarring. You have to show that this is permanent. You have to show that it's unsightly. So there are, there are judicial guide rails for this that will keep it controlled. So I think this is a great bill. I think it covers those people who have been in catastrophic situations or situations that truly need help from the statute, and I encourage a yes vote.
Thank you. I would now like to offer an amendment A00037. Ryan, please explain the amendment.
Amendment A00037 clarifies that the bill applies to permanently disfiguring injuries for which permanent disfigurement is reached on or after the effective date, regardless of when the original injury occurred.
Thank you. Representative O'Mara makes the motion to adopt Amendment A00037. I might have said one too many zeros. And a second by Representative Donahue. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Chairman, excuse me.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll get into the merits of the bill when we get to the bill, but this expands our concerns and adds additional costs because the language, regardless of when they originally occurred on or after the effective date, that will bring in obviously more claims and increased workers' comp costs for our businesses here in the Commonwealth. So for those reasons, we'll be a no on the amendment, and then we'll bring up the bill when we get to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I would urge all members to support this amendment, clarifying amendment. With that, Jonathan, all Democrats be voting in the affirmative, all Democrats be voting in the negative. Yep, that works. All right, and on to the bill for discussion. I now turn to Representative Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. Just to clarify here, first off, I understand the chairman, what he's after here, and folks that have disfigurements and especially burns, as the good gentleman spoke about earlier. I think it's important to note that first, medical costs are still covered in workers' comp, any kind of lost wages, all of those things. If those accidents still happen, are still covered under the workers' comp law. What we're trying to do with this bill is expand the number of weeks, aka the amount of money that folks can receive for a disfigurement claim. And I think it's important to point out that if this bill would pass, that a disfigurement claim could be subject, you could have a severe burn on your thigh or your leg or whatever the case may be and get 400 weeks. Somebody who loses their leg is going to get less than that. And I think that is something that's really concerning with this bill for me. Second off, at the end of the day, we care about we Pennsylvania's on the rise, right? So we gotta make sure our businesses are protected. That's what the workers' comp law, that was the grand bargain that we've talked about, is the way to control costs for workers' comp claims. This particular bill is a way to expand what I think that bargain was, in the sense that we are expanding a pretty good, I think, policy judicial precedent that courts can look at the unsightliness, or the administrative courts can look at the unsightliness of an injury and whether or not that warrants enough claim. If by passing this bill, the unsightliness provisions or that precedent really it loses a lot of its luster, and really, in my opinion, because the whole point of the unsightliness is that it's neck, head, and face. Obviously, that's what you see. You don't see things that are covered under skin necessarily, or under clothes, or and maybe there's a compromise there somewhere. But I think the way the bill's written is that it really eliminates the unsightliness precedent. I think this will be ultimately a huge hurt on our small businesses because it will drive up claims. And at the end of the day, folks that can get these types of workers' comp claims, are just getting more of it's not. Sure, is it helping them? Yes, but I think it's more of a grab at something that's not really solving the issue. They're still getting their medical covered. They're still getting all of their lost wages. This is really just a money grab, in my opinion. And I think that if we want to actually get something that can get signed into law, that there's some compromise that needs to be made. So I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the categorization of this as a money grab is problematic. I clerked on the Commonwealth Court, which saw these cases all the time. Unemployment and workers' compensation are basically the majority of the cases that come before the Commonwealth Court. And when we talk about disfigurement, I mean, the joy of modern medicine is that people are now really able to survive catastrophic injury. But the downside of that is that more and more people are living with significant disfigurement. And that was not contemplated in the workers' compensation law when you're talking about things that you can't see head, neck, and face. But it impacts people's abilities to function, to deal with mental health issues. The disfigurement that people experience it's not just, cosmetic. It's not something that, people just don't like it. It is something that is profoundly impacting on their life, on how they interact with other people, how they view themselves, how other people view them. And that actually can significantly impact somebody's employability. So to compensate somebody for that is really not a huge ask. And when you see case after case before the Commonwealth Court where our scope of review is to say that is determine whether or not an error of law was committed at the administrative level, we ruled frequently that no errors of law were committed, but that doesn't mean that justice was served. And in many ways, that's exactly why I ran for office, was that there are far too many instances where we followed the law and we enforced the law and we upheld the law, but the law was unjust. And when the law is unjust, then we should change it to make sure that we are actually serving justice and that we are supporting the workers and acknowledging the reality that has changed since the first time that we implemented this law to what the reality of the world is now. So I would encourage a yes vote on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I know that many of my colleagues have no idea who I am, but I would like to just, by way of introduction, say that I really do believe that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and myself have more in common than what we have that separates us. I think we all want more or less the same things, Mr. Chairman, in our communities. We want safe neighborhoods, better schools, opportunities for our kids, all of that stuff. We agree on 95% of it. I really do believe that. Where we disagree is how do we get from where we are to where we would like to be. And this is where I think some of my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, I think disagree with this bill. It's not because we don't like the idea of a more just and verdant society. I think we would all like that. The question is, how do we get from where we are to there? Speaking as a small business person, I don't believe our family business has ever employed more than maybe 15 people. I can tell you that an increased cost to the cost of workman's comp insurance is something that small businesses feel. Some businesses can pass that on to customers because we have flexibility in pricing for the products and goods that we provide. Some businesses, like restaurants, operate on such a lean margin. My concern is that that would affect the number of employees that they can hire. They've only got so much money to spend. I can see that the Office of Administration is telling us that in the Commonwealth, this will increase our costs and make things a little bit more complicated for us to work. But my concern is primarily for small businesses in my district. This cost will be passed on to them in some way, shape, or form. I do not disagree with the sentiment of the bill, trying to provide and protect for people who are injured. I've been around this stuff when I was a pastor. I've dealt with these kind of things. We want justice when this stuff happens. I don't know that we fully understand the cost of this, especially when it comes to how it'll affect smaller businesses in rural areas like mine, to keep the doors open. And so that's why I'll be a no on this bill right now, but I am open to be convinced if I'm wrong on any of my premises. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right. Well, last session, this committee considered nearly identical legislation that passed the House with a bipartisan support. This is the legislation that benefits workers who have been seriously injured or scarred on a job. While this compensation in any way cannot fix what has been broken, it is a way that we can ensure that our work force is taken care of when these horrific injuries do happen. I do agree there is some room in the future for us to have those discussions. This is the first step, which is I always try to tell members. This is a long process before this bill reaches the desk of the governor. This is why we have this process, so we can have new ideas come into this committee and or on the floor. So we do look forward to that bipartisan cooperation so we can see if we can advance this bill and not only get it through the House, but also get it through the Senate. So with that, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to take the roll.
Dawkins,
Yes.
Brennan, Donahue, Jarrell, Green,
Yes, and all Democrats are in the affirmative.
Grove.
No, you can list all the Republicans in the negative. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. House Bill 183 is reported as amendment from the House and Labor Industry Committee. And now we'd like to call up House Bill 308, printer's number 261, sponsored by Representative Harkins. Representative Kincaid makes the motion to consider the bill. Ryan, please. Oh, excuse me. Second by Representative Mirsky. Ryan, please explain the bill.
House Bill 308, printer's number 261, establishes workplace health and safety standards for public sector employees in the Commonwealth, similar to the protections currently afforded to private sector workers by the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Act. The bill also provides for powers and duties of the Secretary of the Department of Labor and Industry, creates the Pennsylvania Occupation Safety and Health Review Board, allows for workplace inspections, and imposes penalties for violations of the act.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize the longtime sponsor of this legislation, Representative Harkins, and he could give some brief remarks on House Bill 308. And luckily today we have a good chairman. We don't have to clear out the room, so we can have this discussion on this very important topic.
Thank you, Chairman Dawkins. Thank you, Chairman Grove. Committee members, I was honored to be here this morning. I was labor chairman during COVID. We laugh about it, but I lost my hair and got lockjaw. And I was glad to hand the gavel over to Chairman Dawkins for that reason, along with some others. But again, this is a House Bill 308 is a bill that I have introduced for at least the last 10 years. We call it the Jake Schwab OSHA legislation. I'm here this morning to speak on behalf of House Bill 308, the Jake Schwab OSHA legislation. Once again, we are starting the process of reintroduction of this legislation that we passed in the House, but it died in the Senate last session. This bill will provide OSHA protections to public sector employees who currently don't have coverage that their counterparts in the private sector enjoy. I would point out that I was a UPS guy in Erie, Pennsylvania for 25 years. I did all facets of the employee as an employee. I was a driver. I worked internally, and you watched for slips and falls. And every morning you had safety drilled into you. Watch where you're going, something as simple as putting on your seatbelt and making sure that you were safe and the people around you were safe. The people in the private sector enjoy that protection. And I hear on these other pieces of legislation, people with injuries and slips and falls, and not only the person that's killed, but also the person that's injured severely. And the insurance industry has spoken with me about this. They have an interest, a vested interest in it. Conceivably, you could have a job site where both the private sector and the public sector workers are working in tandem, and the public sector workers don't have OSHA protections, while the public sector worker has none. The inspiration for this legislation is the late Jake Schwab. He was a 48-year-old mechanic at the EMTA, Erie Metropolitan Transit Authority, bus facility in Erie. He went to work one cold November morning and was given the wrong equipment. He was given a jack that wouldn't sustain the weight of the bus. It came down on him and crushed him. I was alerted to this by a UPS driver, actually, that we were mutual friends with. No fault, no burden was borne by the company. There's still talk today that somebody has an issue with the bus company, and we don't. My son works there now. He worked for UPS for a number of years till he hurt his back with UPS. But there's so many different things that come up with this legislation, and Jake Schwab's wife, Tiffany, has been a huge help. She's come down here. She's attended hearings. She's gone with me on TV programs and different things that we've discussed, what she's experienced and what the Schwab family as a whole, brothers and sisters, mom and dad, and everybody else has gone through because of this. And it's not just Jake Schwab, it's PennDOT workers, it's AFSCME employees from all walks of life. They go into work in the morning, they think they're going to come home, have a day at work and come home, and it doesn't happen. His family has been amazing through all of this, through the years. I haven't spoken to Tiffany Schwab in a while, but I'll never forget running into her at Wegmans in Erie on a Saturday evening. She called me and she pulled me over and she said she received a letter from an insurance company saying that the settlement that she received, which wasn't much, the death settlement they called it, would be revoked if she were to remarry due to the way this current legislation or the current law that's in existence. At the time, I talked to former Governor Tom Wolf and explained that to him while we were discussing this legislation, and everyone was kind of miffed by that. But the more that we dig into this, the more there are so many changes that need to be made, as Representative Brennan alluded to on some of the other things. There are so many currently there are so many wrongs for this public sector workers but I ask you to pass this legislation so we can try and get the Senate, and hopefully they won't let it die this time, get it over the goal line and get it to the governor for his signature. My state senator, Dan Laughlin, has publicly stated that he will support this. He committed to this at an open forum that we had last summer, and I was glad to have him on board. When it comes to safety, I don't think that there is a D or an R next to any of the proposals that we put forth. We have lost other workers in boiler explosions, PennDOT accidents, and so many other walks of life. Every May, we see the cones with the helmets of those who have passed out by the fountain, and it definitely touches their heart when you think of the things that these families have experienced. Again, like I said, not only the people who have been killed, unfortunately, but those who have been seriously maimed and injured that affects the rest of their lives. We can't just think of the loss of life, but also the workers who go through these issues and problems. And it's when we run for office, we all tell everybody how we're with the working person, and we want those union people behind us. Now's the time to step up. Now's the time to put forth the right legislation and get this right once and for all. Please vote yes on this. I have compromised over the years on this, and I look forward to working with members on both sides of the aisle. Compromise isn't a bad word. We can get it over the goal line. But I've compromised from a document that's probably about 2 phone books thick down to a few pages, and I don't want to compromise too much more. Please vote yes. I thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Representative. I would like to now recognize Representative Grove, who will be offered Amendment A00033. John, please explain the amendment.
Amendment A0033, Chairman Grove, removes language that refers to the wholesale adoption of federal standards, amendments, and changes in Section 7A of the bill.
Thank you. A motion by Representative Barger to adopt Amendment A0033, second by Representative Jones. Chairman Grove, will make any comments here?
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot of opposition from many different groups on this bill. This amendment is very narrow in its selection. If at least we're going to pass this bill out of a committee today, let's at least make it constitutional. So it pulls out the plain language of the bill that requires the Secretary of Labor and Industry to adopt OSHA safety standards and all future modifications to those standards. The Secretary is only given discretion to develop state standards, quote, if no federal standards are applicable, end quote. This is a violation of PROTS v. Workers' Comp Appeal Board, 2017, Article 2, Section 1 of the Pennsylvania Constitution provides that the legislative power of the Commonwealth shall be vested in the General Assembly, which shall consist of Senate and House of Representatives. So by us giving authority to the department, it violates that legislative authority, that legislative power is an illegal delegation. So the amendment would simply strike that out and put it, at least it is not blatantly unconstitutional anymore, and would appreciate consideration of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else has any questions on the amendment? Well, I want to thank the chairman for offering the amendment, but I will be urging members to oppose it at this time. There are concerns the adoption of the amendment could impact the future of funding, the federal funding, for the program. But I am willing, like I said before, to continue conversations around addressing any potential constitutional concerns or any other issues members of the committee may have. But at this time, I'm asking Jonathan to take the roll.
Dawkins?
Yes. Excuse me,
Brennan?
no. Almost there. Close.
Brennan? Donahue? Jarrell?
No, and all remainder Democrats is voting in the negative.
Grove?
Yes. The Republicans can be listed all as a yes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So on the bill, is there any discussion on the bill? Chairman?
Thank you very much. I was actually going to quip. It feels like it was a decade ago that we did hearings at Labor and Industry Committee when I was on it. You've been a staunch advocate for this, a bulldog. You obviously want to get this done. My fear is putting this bill into the Senate with the same language is going to get an end result. I think we should focus on worker safety. I know Representative Nelson is here. He has obviously an interest in trying to get this done as well. So from our side, we are committed to try to work with you over the next 4 weeks to try to get a bill in position where we can agree, get the stakeholders at least to a neutral spot, and put in position where the Senate will send this to the governor. That's my commitment to you. Hopefully we can get there, but we will work as diligently as we can with you to make that happen. So I look forward to the conversations, and I think the good gentleman over there from Westmoreland's got some pretty good concepts that I hopefully we can meld in and move forward. So at this point, we're going to be a no, but we are 100% open to trying to work with you to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Representative Diorsi.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. A question and a comment here. Regarding the Occupational Safety and Health Review Board, would they essentially be tasked in the appeals process of interpreting federal law?
So, Representative Diorsi, we will get a clarification on the process in which we would communicate with the federal officials in terms of how the application of that particular statute would go into play.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I would have a concern if a state board with 5 of the governor's appointees would be interpreting federal law. Just one other comment, if I may, on the Occupational Safety Board. 5 of the governor's appointees, not very balanced, regardless of who the governor is a concern for me. They wield, within this bill, considerable power. Not only do they have the discretion to create staff and assign per diems for the appeals process, but they would wield power. And if you have 5 appointees who are all in the same ideological bend, whichever bend it is, my concern is that it can become a kangaroo court. So that's my concern. Yeah, thanks for the chance to speak.
Any other? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for coming back for another session of this to Rep. Hark. I don't even see any gray hair in your head yet. I was after the last 2 years. It's you're either committed to the cause or a glutton for punishment. I'm not sure which. I've asked myself the same question. In any event, similar to the previous bill, there's no question about the intent. To Rep. Barger's point, I think we all want to get to the same sort of destination on safety. This strikes me as kind of driving a nail with a jackhammer. There's tons of opposition to it. There's a lot of just the amount of cost and complexity that this would add. Even the governor himself was talking about the need to streamline regulations. A drum that I continue to beat is just our state is growing older, smaller, and poorer by the day. I sit on the aging committee where 25%, I believe, is the number of retirees in this state. It's projected to grow to 33% by 2030. We're the 6th oldest state in the country. We have, significant worker shortage, particularly in senior care, health care, the trades, and so forth. We need all hands on deck working efficiently and productively. And this is just a terrible, while it's well-intentioned, there's an assumption that doing this would have prevented some of these accidents. I'm not sure it would. Sadly, accidents do happen, OSHA or no OSHA. And we need to be as efficient as we possibly can with our workforce. This goes in the opposite direction. I really think we need all hands on deck, and I'm obviously opposed to the bill. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Representative O'Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to really commend the chairman of the bill for continuing to work on this. In reading a brief summary of the history of legislation, either similar or the same, this first came up in the 1989-1990 legislative session, which that was the year I was born. And I'm not that young anymore. So I feel similar to my colleague, Rep. Kincaid. I ran for office because I feel like it's our responsibility as legislators to protect Pennsylvanians. And that's exactly what this bill is going to do. It's going to protect our public sector workers and ensure in light of current events, that we at the state are doing everything we can to keep Pennsylvanians safe. So thank you for continuing this fight, and I look forward to getting it out of the House.
Thank you. Go ahead. Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I do see a pattern between the last bill and this bill. I'm really happy to hear or to perceive here a little bit of an opportunity for bipartisan discussion on a really good bill. But, in our last, looking at scarring and look at some of these things that fall under the workers' comp law, we're talking about the costs. I don't know how we can't be for increasing the protections. If we're concerned about the costs of the Workers' Comp Act, why are we not jumping on board this to say, let's not balkanize our workforce where you're safe in one place and not the other, or where employers are going to be encouraged to cut corners. Something like this is what avoids people getting run over by a forklift, getting crushed by something, getting smushed between God knows what. I think if we're I'm really encouraged to hear some of the discussion that's happening here, and that we're going to continue talking about this. But we are going to lower costs if we avoid these injuries in the workplace, and we have a responsibility to these workers. So I do hope we follow through with those discussions and find a way to keep our workers safe in their workplaces, because I think it's very important. It's important for business, and it's important for our workers.
Well, thank you very much. Representative Siegel.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. And I'd also like to echo the comments of my colleagues in commending Representative Harkins for continuing to bring this bill forward. I'm always amazed by the fact that, the articulation is, if we can't universally or unilaterally prevent every potential injury, then the excuse is we should do absolutely nothing, that we shouldn't try everything possible to keep workers safe. Before I got to the legislature, I had the privilege of serving as a council person in Allentown for nearly 3 years, and I have to say that one of the great opportunities of being a local official is you get to interact in a very intimate level and on a daily basis with your public sector workers. And I think more folks should appreciate the fact that our cities and our municipalities don't function unless we have good, hardworking people who go to work every day and make sure that our police cars and our fire trucks are fixed in city garages, that our streets are plowed when the roads get icy and the snow comes down, to make sure that folks can get to and from work and get their kids to school and childcare. And frankly, the argument that OSHA is an ineffective system is wildly outrageous. In 2018, employers paid out $1 billion a week in non-fatal workplace-related injuries. And in California, where they have both public sector OSHA and private sector OSHA, there's a 10% reduction in workplace safety injuries and a 26% reduction in compensation-related costs. So it is a wildly effective strategy to make sure that our workers are given fair and equal blanket protection when they're on the job. And I think that there is absolutely no excuse to make sure, as Representative Brennan alluded to, that you should be safe in the private sector, but be completely and utterly unsafe from any form of protections when you come to work for a municipality or state government. We owe our workers that. They show up every day for us in a variety of functions, and it's our responsibility to have their back. And this will save municipalities money. This will prevent unintended injuries. This will prevent costs being passed on to taxpayers because our employers at the municipal level want to be negligent when it comes to investing in their workers. I think we should stand with our public sector employees. I understand in this day and age we're more interested in buying out workers, apparently, than building them up, and more interested in making employees take loyalty tests than we are in actually making sure we respect the work that they do. But I think it's time we stand with them after a decade of bringing this legislation up. So let's do the right thing.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Haddock, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our forefathers were brilliant people. I think we would all agree. And many of the standards that they founded are still in place. In most times in government, we name things alphabetically. And if you look at this committee, our brilliant forefathers named this committee, and it was the first in the state of, in the country, Labor and Industry. Well, I becomes before L in the alphabet. Our forefathers put labor at the front of industry because they knew industry would take the cuts and not spend the money to protect their workforce. And that's what we have to do today, is protect our workforce. And we wonder why people don't work in Pennsylvania sometimes. We hear that all the time. Well, maybe certain jobs people don't want to go to because they're unsafe. And it's our job to protect our labor force. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chairman.
Yeah, I just want to put on the record that there are numerous safety laws already into place. If you read through SEPTA's letter on this bill, they highlight numerous safety laws that they already have to abide by currently. So there are safety standards our public entities do already need to. So it's not the wild, wild west out there. So I get that on the record. Two, this does have a cost for implementation. One of which, our local governments are struggling. One of the big pushes, and I know a lot of members on this committee have pushed that, try to get additional money for mass transit. This will be an additional cost to all those entities. So we're looking at a shortfall, particularly with SEPTA, and I believe the Pittsburgh rail system, our transit system. This will extend those costs moving forward. So there is a cost to implementation of this moving forward. But I do want to get on the record. There are safety laws in place for public sector that they do have to abide by. Thank you, Chairman.
There is money from the federal level to implement this. I don't know with the new administration where that is, but I would hope that worker safety would be paramount to them, as has been expressed that it's very hard to find anybody to work these days. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank all the members. I think this was a very lively discussion. It sounds like we do have a pathway forward to potentially get this across the finish line. I'm one of the members who do believe we should pay what it requires to keep our workforce safe. I do not believe there is a value that we place on human life. I believe when we don't have access to workers, we see what happens to businesses. So I'm going to urge, obviously, all members to support House Bill 308. And Jonathan, please take the roll.
Dawkins?
Yes, and all Democrats are in affirmative.
Grove?
No, all Republicans will be on the negative. Thank you.
Thank you.
House Bill 308 is reported as committed from the House Labor and Industry Committee. Seeing no other business, this meeting is now adjourned.